Hi.
reactions and comments and viewers.
Yep.
Oh,
I
yay, we're
see.
live. All right. Well, welcome to Claremont Lincoln University's Changemaker broadcast. We're experimenting with Be Live TV software tonight, and so this is going to be fun. One of the first things we're going to do is put up an agenda so that our viewers know where we're at in the program. And it looks like the first thing we're doing is a welcome. So I think we can check that box. You ladies feel like we can check that?
Yes.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Because that then means we get to the real introductions, which is where our guests tell us a little bit about themselves. And so, ladies, if you would introduce yourselves and tell us about yourselves.
Okay.
Um,
Go ahead,
You
Kimmy.
can go first. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I'm Kimmy. I live in the DC area, and I recently just graduated from CLU with a Master's in Social Impact, and I'm passionate about mental health, and that's kind of what led me to this conversation today.
And
Sorry, that was super brief.
That's fine. That's fine.
and I'm Christine Kobe, and I graduated also Master's in Social Impact last year, about a year and a half ago now. And my main focus or goal, I guess, is to reduce intimate partner violence. And I do that mainly by working with youth.
Yeah. And I'm excited because both of you are doing projects or have done projects through CLU that are expanding and growing. And so I think that's going to be a fun part of our conversation, is to be able to get more and more into that. But to give us some background for that and help us better understand what you're doing, could you tell us the goal for the capstone project you did? And I'll give a little bit of preface for those who are watching who aren't familiar with Claremont Lincoln University. Our program is a master's degree program, and all of our graduates have to do a real world capstone project, which is a measurable application of their studies in the real world. So it's not just reading stuff, it's about doing stuff. And so that's going to be the focus of our conversation today, is the doing things. So what was the goal for the change project that you tackled? And we'll since Kimmy went first last time, we'll start with Christine this time.
Okay. My goal was to reduce intimate partner violence by working with parents, providing a parenting program that was very versatile. So I used a similar product. I used Zoom. And I had parents that would participate, and they had homework. So we would talk about a new topic each week, and then they could journal. They did surveys. They got to use a Likert scale to determine different types of behaviors that either increased or decreased with their children. And they were all ways that were nonviolent, no kind of reward or punishment or anything like that, a lot of quality time. So the tools and skills really that children need in order to have healthy relationships themselves. So it's something called primary prevention. So reducing violence before it ever begins. That was my goal.
Cool. And
Wow.
I heard a couple terms in there too, if we could.
Sure.
Intimate partner violence. So what is that exactly?
So I like to use the term intimate partner violence because it's inclusive. It includes adult domestic abuse. It includes teen dating violence. It includes relationship violence with the elderly, as well as same-sex couples, regardless of whether they're married, they have children, they cohabitate. So it's really just an inclusive term, and I use it because it focuses more on the skills that that would need to have a healthy relationship, as well as the obvious warning signs of a controlling relationship. And I use controlling more than I would abusive also, because I think that sometimes we overlook things that could be considered more subtle that could just escalate over time.
Yeah, so I guess intimate partner violence is about whether it's physical or maybe emotional abuse.
Yeah, emotional, verbal, mental or psychological. It could include small things from telling your partner who they can and cannot be friends with on social media, or looking at their phone. So those would be something that that maybe people would overlook. They would think that that would just fit into a category of being jealous, when of course it could be considered jealous, but either way it's unhealthy, and it can definitely lead to an imbalance of equality.
Nice. Okay, cool. And Kimmy, tell us about your project or your goal.
So the goal of my project. So the goal of my project was to normalize conversation around mental health in the Filipino American community through storytelling. I'm Filipino, and I grew up here in the U.S., and it was really important for me to really advocate for mental health because of personal experience that I have with mental illness. So really the goal was to start these conversations in my community, reduce stigma, and just to really get people to become aware of their emotions and signs and symptoms of mental illness, and how other people are experiencing it around them as well. And I named the project the Kwentuhan Project. Kwentuhan in Tagalog, which is Filipino, is loosely translated to storytelling. And storytelling in the Filipino culture is incredibly impactful, and it's a way of life. We exchange a lot of our knowledge through each other's stories. So it was vital for me to plug that into my change project, and to just encourage others to continue telling their stories of mental illness and struggle, to hopefully empower other people to share as well. So yeah, that was pretty much my goal, is just to really normalize these conversations in my community.
Yeah, and I guess I hear in both your projects an emphasis on having difficult conversations on signs, symptoms, behaviors, mental and emotional health. So it feels like there's a lot of similar concerns in your work.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that we need. There's the statistic is kind of escaping me right now, but I talk about in my paper that there is a very prevalent, number of Filipino individuals growing in America that have mental illness, and due to whether it's cultural notions and stigma, it's just not talked about. So I wanted to really combat that with a lot of my own personal story as well as others.
Nice. Yeah, and speaking of personal stories, I think that's a great segue to talk about what inspired these projects. And so, Kimmy, since you mentioned your personal story, could you jump in there for us?
Sure. Really inspired my work was my personal experience with mental illness. So I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety when I was 22. I'm 31 now. So for a really long time, I was struggling with depression and struggled to talk about it. But through school, through therapy, and with the support of my friends and my family, I was able to treat my depression, treat my anxiety. And I've been fortunate to see firsthand how mental health awareness impacts one's ability to speak. It really is a ripple effect when you're able to witness someone else overcome these intense, like stigmatizing feeling of being unable to actually talk, and these self-defeating like thoughts and unhealthy thoughts affect all parts of your health and well-being. So I was fortunate to work in several mental health nonprofits and meet individuals who started talking to me about their experiences, and it honestly empowered me to start talking about my own. So I wanted to take that concept and bring it into my project, you know, have others share their story with me, and then with their consent, obviously share it with others to help others see that our exchanging of stories, our exchanging of overcoming these struggles really makes a difference.
Nice. Yeah, and thanks for being so open here on Facebook with your story, and certainly is very much in tune with the work that your project featured, right? Telling your story. So
yeah, definitely.
So Christine, tell us about what inspired your work.
So also disclosure, I'm a survivor of intimate partner violence. So right out of high school, I was in a pretty severely abusive relationship that included a lot of physical abuse. And at the time, I didn't really understand it to be that, because the only thing I knew about abuse was from really intense abuse in movies, like Sleeping with the Enemy, and that just wasn't my situation. And similar to what Kimmy was saying too, is that I think that there's a stigma attached. There still is, and people don't really discuss it. And I feel that if I would have known the warning signs, and I would have known what a healthy relationship included, and had those skills myself, then I could have at the very least recognized it early on, and wouldn't have had to overcome my own issues with mental health, PTSD, and just take, I'm proud of the surviving that I've been able to do, and the overcoming and the healing and all of those things. And I would never change anything because I'm using it to make a difference, just like Kimmy is. But that was my original inspiration. And then the people that work in my field of violence prevention, violence against women, we use a tool called the Power and Control Wheel. And when my own children were fairly young and I was starting to work at this domestic violence center, I had to go through a lot of training, and I just started making these connections of typical parenting styles and techniques. And they just resembled so much of the techniques that were on this Power and Control Wheel. And I made a conscious decision at that point to do something different with my own children.
Wow. So again, thank both of you for being just being brave, being vulnerable, sharing your stories, and also for the hope that you're offering to a lot of different people. And certainly as a father of two daughters, I really appreciate women who are willing to share their stories to help. Obviously, you're offering stories to empower everyone. But certainly to have strong women as examples, I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for putting it together too.
Yeah. And so when you created your 10-week pilot project for CLU, what were some of the actions that you took in order to make the change happen, this positive change?
I sent out surveys to find out who might be interested and in what formatting. Originally, I was supposed to work with parents that sent their kids to the Boys and Girls Club, and that was going to be seemed like a perfect venue, but it turned out that the culture of the group of parents that use that facility were not ready to have those conversations yet. I think that they were a little guarded still. And then I had some people that were very interested that didn't live in my area. And I just thought, well, if I can get a master's degree online, then I can teach a parenting course online. So, it was definitely a lot of steps, but it was kind of like looking at obstacles and saying, okay, so what now? What's next? And then just kind of going over the obstacle and figuring out what would work.
Yeah, the word that comes to mind and that I often share in those mentoring conversations with students is pivot, right? You pivot.
Yes.
And Kimmy, how about your action plan?
Well, it was kind of like a three-step process. First, I made sure with the people that I asked to, so I asked a lot of several Filipino Americans to share their stories with me. And some of them were my friends, some of them were my colleagues in the past. And what I did was, at the end, I collected all of these stories and published it online for listeners to listen to and to give me feedback of how they felt after listening to these stories. But before all of that, I made sure that I created a safe space for the interviewees to share their intimate details with me that have affected their mental health and emotional well-being. So I, really made sure that they understood that I would be publishing it online. I wanted to make that completely clear because mental health stories or mental illness stories are so sensitive. Mm-hmm. And so I obtained permission to record them and then, published it online and shared it with others and encouraging them to really set foot into the interviewee's shoes, to open their minds to another social world, breaking down whatever assumptions they may have had before. So that was kind of like a three-step process, getting the interviewees, making sure that they knew that it would be published, and creating that safe space, and then publishing it online, and then having listeners listen to it and give me feedback about how they felt after listening to the stories.
Yeah, and how interesting that both of your projects featured a virtual component.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize how difficult it would be actually to edit audio and like make a website and do all these things that I did through my action design. And it definitely challenged me within 10 weeks to create everything at once. But I think that at one point, with the help of Dr. Ward, it was a lot of taking a step back and realizing that things change, that you may not have time. So you just need to adapt and cut things out if you need to ensure that you're, one, not stressed out, but two, focusing on the actual change in itself, and not really whether or not your website looks great.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was able to take the recordings that I did with my Zoom sessions and send them to participants that were actually able to participate at that moment, which was kind of nice. So that was something that I was able to measure later that I never intended to be a part of the project. There's gifts and lessons everywhere.
Yeah, and that's what's fun about these projects. I think, traditional research models and the way we typically think of research are very controlled settings, right? Mm-hmm. But action research can really be wild and woolly sometimes, right? Yeah. You have participants who may come in or drop out. And there's a lot of serendipitous learning that happens. And I think that's That's part of the fun. And in fact, that actually sort of leads to our next point of the conversation, which is to talk about the results that you saw. So what were some of the results, both what you expected and what you didn't expect? And Christine, could you go first?
Sure. I guess what I expected was obviously that the parents would have a deeper connection, increased connection, and some improvement in their own dialogue that they would have with each other. And that definitely happened. What I was not expecting is that most of the participants realized that there was an improvement in the overall routine. So many of them struggled with routine and schedules, and those types of things improved. And that was because of one of the assignments that they had to do each week, which was spending some quality time with their kids. And what they realized is that their children were much more likely to kind of get with the program of the morning routine or the evening routine if they had had some good quality time with their parents first. So that was nice to see.
Nice.
Well, for me, the results that I saw was amazing. I mean, I found that the listeners of the stories really connected with them, and from feedback, they said that they found themselves relating to these stories and having these very intimate aha type moments, and seeing themselves, in the interviewee's experience. And I didn't expect, so I actually had two different listening groups, and both listening groups, they listened to the interviews one after the other, and post all of the interviews, I gave them surveys so that they can give me feedback. But I didn't expect them to physically talk rather than like actually write down what they were thinking. They kind of put the surveys down and just started a dialogue within themselves. And I was like moderating it. So that was, to me, I loved it. I loved that. And I loved that they were willing to share immediately after hearing these stories. They like writing down their thoughts kind of escaped them versus, them kind of just jumping in and talking to each other. And I think that goes to show the power of storytelling, and the power of like sharing stories that are so personal and so intimate. Because mental health, or mental illness affects all of us. So it becomes, like I said, that kind of contagious and ripple effect where if you're telling something so deeply personal to about yourself to someone else, and then you're seeing, and that other person is seeing a relation, you kind of automatically feel and compelled to share your own experience. So I definitely saw others talking about mental illness and mental health awareness, and I heard from others saying that they didn't realize how some of their thoughts were kind of adding to the stigma of mental illness in the Filipino American community, and listening to stories definitely changed their perception. So that's pretty much the results that I saw in my own project.
Neat.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
And so, what were some of the things that you enjoyed most about the work?
Do you want to go first, Christine?
Sure. I think that what I enjoyed most was that I had a couple families that their children participated too, which was, I'm wondering if maybe they thought it was supposed to be that way all along. And it turned out to be just this really great family work they were doing together. So it evened the playing field even more. And I enjoyed hearing from the kids to find out what worked for the week and what they felt they wanted to improve on for the upcoming week. So that was really neat and totally unexpected, but I did look forward to that.
Yeah, and I'm reflecting on Kimmy talking about the people in her discussion groups who couldn't help but talk with each other and share. It feels like there's a lot of community building going on in both these projects as well.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think
yeah, and with this whole community building aspect, I think that's actually what I enjoyed the most throughout, the whole course, or the 10 weeks. I felt like I was building, or I was, in this community to build on mental health awareness, really. And I really enjoyed listening and learning about some of these stories, and some of these stories that I listened to, they were my friends' stories that I didn't know before. They were some of my colleagues, stories that I didn't know. And just learning about it made me honestly like 10 times more empathetic than I was. And it helped me understand that in future conversations, I really need to kind of take a step back with whether it's with a coworker, whether it's a family member, a friend, a colleague, to go into every conversation with an incredible amount of empathy, because what that other person says you may not expect. So you kind of have to obviously be mindful of what you're thinking, of what you're saying. So I definitely enjoyed the listening aspect of my project, and being able to kind of practice empathy and mindfulness throughout the whole time.
Yeah, that reminds me, of course, in class we talk about the 3 layers of change, right? So there's change for yourself as a change practitioner, there's change for the participants that you're working with, and then there's also some measure of change in the larger issue that you're addressing. If I may, it's kind of just a follow-up. Are there any other changes that you can think of along those 3 lines, whether it's change for yourself, change you saw in those you were working with, or how you felt like you were able to address change for the issue itself?
Kimmy, you
can. I think that actually leads really well with just change making, the whole change making process in general. For me, like change making action design was a very personal and introspective process. There's this idea of habitus. I forget the sociologist behind this notion, but that we're born into an existing culture with social norms and standards, and we grow up with a particular way of thinking without really thinking about it. So when our thinking is challenged, our eyes are like open to brand new thoughts and knowledge, enabling us to change ourselves. And I found that change the action design really helped me in combating all of my thoughts and combating the previous assumptions I've had before. So when you're really able to challenge your past way of thinking, that's when you're able to change yourself and to change how others are viewing your new perspective. So yeah, I think there's kind of just different layers, like you were saying. There's change within ourselves and their actual project and the community, but all of that really began with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I for myself, it was that whole entire process was like a how-to guide, and I think that when I had originally enrolled, I was just really searching for what was next. Like, I had been doing this type of work for a decade, and I just felt like it was still my life's work, but I knew that it needed to look different because I wasn't seeing numbers change. And I was still reading headlines, and I was still looking at the same statistics, and we were still, getting the same number of hotline calls and things. And it was the same questions in the classrooms from the students that I would go and visit. And so for me to learn how to really make a bigger impact and think outside of the box, I really struggled with what type of change project, what my capstone was going to be. I flip-flopped so many times, and I just had to just kind of like just stick with one. And that for me was a big change too, because I'm not used to doing that. I analyzed to paralyze, and then I take time off and don't do anything for a while, and kind of being forced to do it in that 10 weeks. Like Kimmy was saying, like that was a challenge for me, and I didn't like it at all. And I knew that for my personal project, like that wasn't the thing for me. That wasn't, it didn't feel like the right focus for me, but I had to do it anyway, and I had to be committed to it, and I had to accept the process and learn from that process and appreciate it, and take everything that I learned from that and utilize it, and use it kind of like as a catapult into, okay, now what do we do? Like, now we know how to do it. Now let's do this. So it was change on so many different levels.
Yeah, and that's good. It's funny because the next point on the agenda was, what did you learn about change making? But it feels like in your conversation, both of you really addressed that well. Is there anything else that you learned about change making you'd want viewers to hear?
It's uncomfortable, but it can be just this, it's a period of growth, a feeling of growth that, you just, even though it's uncomfortable, just keep going because it's supposed to be that way. We don't grow unless it's uncomfortable. And something really great can come out of that if you just keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I was definitely uncomfortable often within the 10 weeks that we were doing our project, and that uncomfortability came from, like Christine was saying, not be in the beginning, not really, for me, not accepting certain changes that were happening through my project. So if there was like cancellations or scheduling conflicts, and it gave me a ton of anxiety, to be honest. But I learned that, change making and action design is such a fluid process that you have to accept the process, like Christine was saying, and adapt to the change, and not really get stuck on should have, like this should be happening, this should have happened, etc. And because unexpected things come up and you can't control them, so you kind of just need to adapt to it and then write about it later on, and learn from it.
Yeah, as I'm listening to both of you talk, it feels like maybe one of the great lessons, I think for all of us, is learning how to experience the uncomfortable without jumping into that fight or flight space. And if I want to sound really kind of zen about it, to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Making peace with that.
Yeah. Change is inevitable. So we can, we learned in our mindfulness core course that you can't change what's happening, but what you can do is change your reaction to it. So that's once you figure that part out, then I think things can have a better flow.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so what advice do you have for others who would want to make similar changes in their world?
I think, oh, go ahead, Christine.
No, you go.
I think my best advice would be to learn to take a step back and kind of just look at the change-making process.
Oh, I think we may be losing you there, Kimmy. Well, Christine, why don't you share, and then we'll see if we can get Kimmy back.
Okay. So I would say I did write down some things that I was thinking about as far as advice, and my main thing is to use what you already know. So tap into who you are and build on that strength. To not be afraid. What I've learned since then, my biggest piece of advice is to continue. I saw that there's a comment from one of our viewers, and that's how to sustain the change. And sustainability is so important. And what I've learned since graduation, since the capstone project, is that you have to be willing to put yourself out there. I could do all of these amazing things, and if I'm not letting people know about it, if I'm not being an invitation to others, if I'm not challenging myself to see, okay, where can I take this next, then it's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be just something that was started and finished, and okay, now what? And so I would say that, and then my next piece of advice would be to meet people and really connect with them, because that collaboration, that possibility of collaboration is what can also help with the sustainability. You never know who you're going to be in a room with. So put it out there. Let everybody know what you're up to. You've worked hard for it. So do it.
Nice. Kimmy, we've got you back. So
nice.
What advice would you give to others who are trying to do similar work?
Well, I actually just wanted to quickly comment. I heard the last 45 seconds of what Christine said when I came back, but something she said resonated with me when she was talking about putting yourself out there and collaborating with others, and that's that's excellent advice, because for me, I struggled even now to really talk about my project, and the primary reason is because I have depression and I have mental illness, and it's to this today it's still hard for me to be open and transparent about it. But through taking through CLU and through the Change Project, I'm slowly able to overcome this fear, and I began to talk to others, to collaborate with them to sustain my project. And I was telling Dr. Ward earlier that I'm hosting another roundtable in July and publishing that on social media, things like that. And I think my main advice is to really look at your project and talk to yourself and see how, what are the uncomfortable aspects of your project, and break it down and figure out, while this is uncomfortable, is it really going to help others? Is this going to be sustainable? And use that as fuel, this whole notion of this is going to help other people, use it as fuel to keep going. And I think that is my best advice for change making and for anyone going into action design, is keeping that in mind. Like, you're doing this for a purpose. So that should be your main motivator, your main fire, your main fuel to keep going with your project. And it really shouldn't end within your 10 weeks of doing it.
I think it's addictive. I can't stop, and it's been a year and a half, so I just keep going.
Yeah, I describe myself as a growth junkie. So that's one of the fun things about getting to work at CLU and working with students. I tell my colleagues all the time that I love this gig because people like you, I get all these endorphins just by hanging out. So thank you both for your time tonight. Is there anything else you want to say to those who are watching the video?
We have some comments here. So I didn't know, do we have a time limit? Are we able to get to the comments?
Sure. That sounds great. We're making it up as we go. This is serendipitous, remember?
So let's see. Are we all able to see them? So
yes, this is me.
Yep. Okay, so
and then we can all right. Yeah. So yeah, that'd be great. Answer some of these questions.
Okay. So advice that I would give to young girls in a abusive relationship by their boyfriend, I would say that they need to start addressing how they feel, how certain behaviors make them feel. And as an adult, I always tell adults that when they're having these conversations with young people, or even with a friend, it could be the same age group, is to let them know that the resources that are available to them, there's so many websites that are out there, chooserespect.org, Love is Respect, where teens can go when they are ready. They don't have to break off the relationship in order to talk to someone about it. There's a national teen dating violence hotline that is confidential, and teens can text to be able to get some advice and to have those conversations. But I think that's the two main things is to have that teen, that young person, look at those websites. There's so many little quizzes and memes and things like that really relate to young people. So that's the biggest advice that I would give for a younger person.
Very good. Kimmy, do you see anything in the comments that you'd want to address?
Yeah, I see a question here. It says, do you mentor adolescents with opioid abuse? No, I don't. So I'm not a mental health therapist. I'm not a doctor or a licensed clinical social worker, but I definitely advocate for anyone with addiction or mental health illness to seek, professional help. I've gone through countless hours of therapy, and I can say that it works. And I've struggled with the perfect kind of cocktail of medications to help me get through the day. But it's not an overnight process. Mental illness, overcoming mental illness, actually something that has resonated with me throughout the years of coming out and understanding that I have depression is that one of my psychology professors in college mentioned that depression isn't curable, it's just treatable. So that I feel like understanding that mental illness and having addictions it can come back. So with the proper amount of treatment, consistent treatment, with a licensed clinical social worker, a therapist, a doctor, it really helps. So no one should go through it alone. They should definitely have the support of their friends and their family and mental health professionals to help with whatever you're going through. So no, I don't mentor, but I definitely advocate for whoever needs help to seek it.
And that's a great point too. I think for those that are watching, certainly we've talked about what a layperson or if you would, the average person can do without a lot of highly specialized training to try to make a positive difference on these issues. But we'd also say certainly that professional help, licensed professionals, those are going to be significant resources that we would encourage anyone to go to. Yeah.
There's another question from Sargon here. From experience, self-esteem versus self-compassion, which one would you recommend personally? Self-esteem versus self-compassion. I'm not sure I understand.
I think the self-esteem comes from self-compassion, doesn't it?
Yeah, I would think, yes, I agree. I agree with you. I think they relate and they coincide with each other. So I don't know if you can really pin them against each other in a versus manner. I think both are equally important to have. And I think self-esteem, like Christine says, comes from being compassionate with yourself and kind of accepting your flaws and accepting who you are. And that aids in increasing your self-esteem.
Right.
Yeah, it feels to me like maybe there's that element of self-esteem saying, I'm so great. And it's possible then for that to be challenged if you make a mistake. Whereas self-compassion is the ability to say, yeah, I screwed up and there's still good here as well.
Absolutely. Sometimes even better after that mistake.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And again, the learning piece.
And it looks like Sargon said to please read Dr. K. Neff's article. It'll be beneficial. I will definitely look that up. Thank you.
Yeah. Dr. Neff does a lot of work on self-compassion. And there's a website there that's slipping my mind, but I'll do my best to follow up somehow through our Facebook link, and I'll try to link that out below. And speaking of links, are there any other online resources that you'd recommend our viewers take a look at if they would like to know more about these topics?
Well, I gave out the links that I would use for young people, and that's where my work, usually lies. But I was not teaching high school when I was still, when I had started this program. And by the time I was graduating, I was a high school teacher, which is not something I ever really thought that I would be doing. But it was my way to reach more students in a more direct way. And now my program is growing. It's going to be district wide. And I think that, if the schools in your area, for the viewers, if they have any questions or are interested in, incorporating any kind of healthy relationship type of information, what I was able to work on and accomplish this past year was to make the information able to fit into an English class. So it's complete with English language arts and reading standards attached to it, which makes those standards, state standards, highly engaging for that individual. So if anyone out there would like some resources, you can always email me and I can get those for you on how to incorporate that into your own high schools and middle schools.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And for mental health awareness, I would just say, to go into NAMI's website. I found resources there to be incredibly beneficial, even for my own capstone project. And I reference, in terms of Filipino American mental health, I reference Dr. Kevin Nadal pretty often in my research. He is a huge advocate for mental health within the Filipino American community, and he's written several books to kind of dive deeper into mental health awareness and mental illness within my community. So if anyone is interested, definitely look him up. And I can also add resources to the comments later on, including my own website that I created during the capstone period.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd ask both of you, if you think of any online resources you'd recommend, please make comment below the video box when you have opportunity, so that those who are, because the beauty of this is this will be archived on our Facebook site for a while, so that'll give access to other folks.
Awesome.
Great resource.
Yeah, well, it has been a delight to talk with both of you. I thought this was going to be a 30-minute conversation, and I'm looking, it says here Texas time, it's 7:51. And I think that's really just a testimony to the depth of work that you both have done, to your willingness to share that work and to see a positive change in your communities. So on behalf of Claremont Lincoln University, thank you, Kimmy. Thank you, Christine. And we'll stay in touch.
All right. Thank you so much.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye.